Hi, and welcome everybody to another edition of Deep Thoughts in the Shallow End. Today we're going to do a gap analysis. So this is a great opportunity right now with swimmers not being in the water for the most part to actually look at their strokes and figure out why they do certain things when they race. So why is your start the way it is? Why is your underwater the way it is? How is the flow of the stroke? How does the stroke change or fall apart at the end of a race, regardless of what race or what stroke it is? Same thing with turns and finishes. And so right now, as we don't have the ability to create new muscle memory, we sort of, for the most part, most swimmers right now aren't swimming, thus your muscle memory is sort of like from the distant past. You can at least understand where you're at, do some of the dryland stuff that you're doing at home that can help mimic the components that you want to work on. And you can do some stuff like some visualization to work on these things going forward. And so today we have on video Gigi, who is our swimmer from the academy, and we have Carolyn, who's going to break it down and go over all the different components. So Carolyn, over to you.
Okay, so we are going to use a software to go through the video here. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with this. This is just what I'm using as a video replay tool here. What we have is one of Gigi's most recent races from the provincials. It's the 100-meter fly preliminaries. And Gigi, I forget, what lane are you in here?
Lane 5.
Lane 5. This guy? This person?
Yep, pink cap.
Okay, pink cap. Pink cap. So what I'm going to do is play through it, and Gigi, you let me know, A, what did you think of your start? And what we'll do is, how did you compare on your time on the block with the others? And when we all come out of water, where do you think you were sitting in the race after that point? So I'll play it through the first time, and then we'll go back and review it a little slower.
Yeah, I think my dive was better than it has been. I also think like after the breakout is about maybe second or third out of the water. Reaction time off the blocks about the same, I'd say, as everyone else other than Penny right next to me.
So you're about the same off the blocks, and you were one of the first ones to come out and surface here. What did you think of your transition?
Can you go back a little bit?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. My head stayed pretty low because I know sometimes you can see my goggles when I break out, but for the most part I stayed pretty low there. So I'm actually pretty happy with that.
Now let it play it forward. What do you think of the timing of your stroke and your kick? Are you happy with the kick? Did you feel you got into a rhythm in the race?
I didn't feel the rhythm that well in this race, if I remember, but I do think the knee kick is a bit much. Like the kick itself is pretty big, and then my hand entry is a little bit off.
And when you say hand entry, what are you referring to there?
Instead of like fingertips down and entering the water right in, it's more they're slanted inwards, so I'm kind of losing water there. Like right there, you can see like my palms, and then the back of my hands are hitting the water instead of my fingertips.
That's really good observation.
So Gigi, why is that not what you want? Like, why are you working on that?
Yeah, because when I enter too narrow, well, it starts to enter narrow, but also like when they're entering all sideways like that, I slip in the water, and then instead of just being able to pull straight back, then I have to kind of lose water by going out and then back. So I can avoid that step.
And can you feel that when you swim, or does it just naturally happen to not do that? Like everybody says they feel the water a certain way, or that the stroke feels a certain way. So can you explain how you know when you're doing it right versus how you know when you're not doing it right, or does it just happen automatically?
I don't think it's really automatic. I find this is one that I can feel it pretty good if someone tells me like, oh, you're entering really narrow, or you're entering sideways, like your hands are sideways, then I can kind of put the connection between how it feels and what someone's telling me. But without that, I do find it a little bit difficult to tell, other than I can tell when it feels really narrow or really wide. You can tell a bit the difference when your hands are entering sideways versus right in. But I find that one's harder than like the narrow or wide. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, cool.
Okay, so this time we're gonna be entering into the turn coming up here. Can you just make a comment on number of breaths, or what your strategy is in terms of breathing going into the wall?
Yeah, usually I'm doing like a 1 up, 1 down breathing pattern, so I try to maintain that into the wall. But I really like to make sure that the last stroke into the wall is head down, so that way it makes the turn better.
Is that what you naturally like to do? Does your brain like that, or do you have to work on that?
Well, I had to work on that for a while, but now I like doing that. So, but it's still like you have to think about it to time the wall right, to make sure that that happens. Because sometimes, I mean, you don't time the wall right, and then you do end up with the stroke that's up into the wall, which isn't favorable. I like the length of the stroke here, though. I think I was finishing the stroke pretty well, so that's good.
And when you say finishing the stroke, you're referring to what exactly?
And not pulling up with my elbow too soon, like I'm making sure that it's a long stroke.
Yeah, very nice. And then the turn itself, would you say this is a strength of yours, a weakness of yours? How do you feel about your turns in general?
Probably a weakness for me. I do think that I've made some improvements on it. That turn there, I have had better, but I've had worse as well. So it was kind of in the middle for how well it was, but there was definitely some things I could fix on it.
Okay, I'm just gonna play this back one more time. And what I'll do is, as you get into the wall, I'll play it down a little bit more slowly. And if you can walk me through some of the things you're looking for technically as you turn.
Okay. Okay, so I'm looking for like the last stroke to be not too long or like too short. Here it looks pretty good, I think. And then I want to stay low in the water. Here I come out a bit higher than I'd like, and I think that's probably because my hips are not as tight as I'd like to be. They kind of swing out to the side. They're not ducking right under. And so I'm kind of, it's slower and I'm coming out higher.
So you come into the wall nice and square. So you're saying underneath water, you're kind of turning your body to the side a little early.
Yeah, because you can see like my whole back, because you can see the straps and everything.
Yep.
And then when I push off there, I'm not like on my back, but a little bit looking up to the sky more than I'd like to be. I'd rather be looking over to the side so that I'm staying on my shoulder rather than like my shoulder blade.
Yeah, how will that help you turn quicker? What's the advantage of being able to get the shoulders turned in a bit more?
It's just faster, and it's less time underwater that you have to spend like rotating and getting into the right position.
And then what do you think of the timing of your stroke with your kicks here?
I think that one's okay. I think I like the dive breakout better. That one just looked like my head broke a little bit early, but I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, and I think it was important to note you also didn't breathe on the first stroke too, which was good.
Yeah, that's something I always like to do.
And what do you think about the rhythm of this stroke or your stroke rate compared to the first lap? Did you feel you maintained that?
I think it dropped, but I remember feeling like this. I was thinking mostly on this last 25 about keeping the stroke long, and I think that I did maintain that, so that was good. I wasn't too happy with the finish though.
And what was it about the finish you didn't like?
Yeah, just I took too many breaths into the wall. I think there was 1 or 2 inside the flags, which I'd rather there be none inside the flags.
Okay. So you're talking from around this point forward?
For flights, I feel like I'm usually a bit later before I put my head down, but probably right there I would have liked it to be my last breath.
Okay.
But there's 2 extra ones from where I would have liked it.
Carolyn, can we back it up at the 85-meter mark? Gigi, how are your hips and how is your kicking, your hips, knees, feet on the last 15 meters compared to the previous?
Okay. I think my hips were a bit higher on the first lap, but they're still pretty high here, which is good, but there's less of a knee bend, it looks like to me, because I'm not getting as much of like the white water at the end, and I can see less of my foot.
Carolyn?
Yeah, she looks a little bit lower than she did the first time. And I feel she kind of comes up on her breaststroke a little bit higher out of the water than we saw in the first one. She really picks her head up, and as you like to use the word, Dawn periscope for a bit.
But I think that's an interesting thing that Gigi just said, that like if you're kicking too much from your knees, a lot of things that most swimmers look at and at the end of 100 or 200 butterfly is, are their feet still breaking the surface? And so although that can be a really helpful part of the race to help you finish the race properly, by mistake, you could be kicking harder but getting less out of it because you're bending your knees more and not really utilizing your hips. Carolyn, can you talk about that?
Well, all the power is from your hips. As soon as you lose the hips and you're just kicking with the knees, essentially all you're doing is creating more drag and not getting any of the power as a result from it. So you're slowing yourself down with the drag and you're not getting the power to overcome that. So overall, it's just slow. And why just use your quads to kick your knees when you have an entire torso and you work on all that core strength? Time to use all of it. Use as many muscles as you possibly can. You can definitely see she gets less out of her kick in the last strokes.
The actual touch itself, I felt, was pretty good.
Yeah, and why would he say it was pretty good?
Because I'm not touching like with my face. I'm not too short, and I'm also not gliding for a really long time or like doing the kind of dolphin-y dive thing at the end. It's a little bit of a glide, but it's pretty straight into the wall.
So I think one of the things that occurred to me here is you did a good job of reaching forward instead of dipping your hands down and then trying to bring them back up to the surface.
Yeah.
So I liked how you stretched out and kept them along the surface of the water, because we know that's the shortest distance to the wall.
Yeah.
So from a technical side, Gigi talked about a lot of different things. How often are you paying attention to those different components inside of a workout, whether it's you're doing 50s or 25s or 100s or whatever the workout is? How often are you thinking about these things?
I try to think about them, like, I want to say like all the time. I know that sounds kind of like unrealistic, but I usually try and pick one thing for like each set or each like rep that I want to work on. So sometimes I'll make sure that my hips are high, and sometimes I'll just really focus on the hand entry. And then obviously like the turn, I like a lot when we do like a video work like this to look at a turn and then I can go back and do it because it's easy to make the connections. But I feel like even if you're focusing on like one thing, like high hips, it can kind of help with like a chain reaction almost. And so that's why I find that easy to think about, is if I pick one or two things that kind of can help everything in general. And especially like when we do more of technique sets, I find it easiest to do then. And yeah.
So when you mean
like maybe not having a really fast hit time, or we're not, I don't know, there's nothing else really that we're doing. Like it's not like partly like, I don't know, a breath control set or something else. Like I just mean like it's just for swimming to make sure that you're doing things properly.
Yep. Really well done, Gigi.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's great, ladies. Like, it's pretty hard to do, to have yourself walk through a race, let alone do it with a couple of other people standing around. But I think, Gigi, that this is something that everybody could do at home, and it would be really helpful for them just to actually like take a piece of paper and write down all the different components, and then just really analyze how, like, what are you doing? Are you getting off the blocks the same time as everybody else? And if you are, why? And if you aren't, why are you not? When you surface, are you ahead or behind everybody else in your heat? If you are, why or why not? And then just do that all the way along. It's not just about the split. It's not just about the stroke count. It's about every part of it, and then figuring out how much different are my strokes in the last 3 strokes of the race compared to the first 3 strokes of the race, and everything in between. So Carolyn, you get to see the Academy group weekly. People just can't like snap their fingers and all of a sudden change their technique. I mean, they can't do that.
I wish they could.
Right, but I mean, they can do that if they came out of a workout and then just came over and did video work with you. Everybody looks like a superstar. But really the hard part is, what do they look like on those spot checks? And like, there's obviously a big difference on a spot check inside of a workout, inside of a set, versus coming over and working with you. How long does it take to actually make a change? And how do you explain to somebody, like, they can't do 5 things at once? Gigi said she tries to work on 1 thing at a time inside of a set. So can you just go over that a little bit?
Yep. So when I first started working with Gigi, one of the things we did when I first saw her is we just kind of walked through and talked about a few of the little technical errors that had come up. And then together we kind of decided which ones we wanted to have more of a focus to. And I think one of the things people do wrong when they're doing video analysis is, when you're going through video slow motion, it's easy to pick out like a million different things. You can put any Olympic world champion up there and they will be able to pick out tons of things that they're trying to correct. So really it was a matter of determining, one, what was Gigi comfortable working with, where she felt that, okay, in training, I can apply this every single rep as I go through. Because the athlete also has to be ready to make that change too. Some things seem a little daunting if you just go into a turn, so we just pick on some little things in terms of the pitch of the hands, for example, and you can tell. I'm glad Gigi picked it up, because we've spent some time on the hand entry for one, because as Gigi talked about, if her hands come in a little to the side, then the tendency is to push out, and we know if we want to go forward, we need to be pulling them back first. So we just look at small little things like that. And really change, how long does it take once you decide to pick something? And the idea is not to pick more than 1 or 2 different things, and that's dependent on the athlete, but you want them to be able to find things they can focus on and not have so many things in their head where it's paralysis by analysis. And Gigi was one that really came out and goes, no, I can do this. Let me work on this. We're going to keep working on this until I get it. And what's nice is when I do the little spot checks, which is one of my favorite things when the athletes don't know I'm looking. Okay, well, can I see that she is trying to do that, whether they're warming up or cooling down, whatever it is. And I think that's the most important part, is you could see that she's actively working on it on a daily basis, and working on it not just when you're in the pool, but when you're outside of the pool doing dry land. So little things in terms of, everyone does band work during their dry land training. Are you being conscious of the pitch of your angle? Yes, you're pulling back an elastic band, but that's where you can be creating poor habits that translate to the pool. But that's also an opportunity to correct those habits and have that translate to the pool too. So it goes both ways, and it's not just what you do in the pool. So someone with Gigi who puts the effort in, day out, we can spend time on a couple things. it can take just a matter of a couple of weeks if you want it to be. Again, it's only the effort that you put in will determine the success you have in correcting those changes. And we'll move on to something else like turns, for example, and then, you know, after a couple of weeks of that, we'll come back, just touch base. Okay, while you were working on this, were you still able to maintain those other corrections that we need? So you do need to do spot checks, but you need to be very careful that athletes only have 1 or 2 things to focus on, because ideally we want them to be able to do it in training. No matter what the pace, whether it's a technical set or not, we want them to be working on technique at all times. That's how you create habits. But we want them to be able to think about it in training so they don't have to think about it in the race, because in a race you also have tactical things you need to be conscious of as well. So hopefully you can take care of all of that in practice, and you can focus on the tactical versus the technical when you're in competition. So you can't expect that if you're not doing it in training that it's just magically going to appear for the competition. But that is something athletes like Gigi do an excellent job with, is they are just very confident, very focused, and they do everything with purpose. And that's why Gigi's able to see success and continue to grow. And, you know, world's her oyster as to where she can go. Every time I see technical errors, I'm like, yes, we haven't hit a ceiling. There's so much more we can do. So that's always great. But you'll get in what you get out of it. Like, you'll get out what you put in, right? So.
Awesome. So, hey, Gigi, the neat thing is that we didn't talk about your time at all during this whole discussion. And I think one of the things that swimmers by mistake do, I mean, I know I did this when I swam. Both my kids have done this. Nobody is perfect, but it is realizing that a best time doesn't mean that it was a great swim. It means like some parts of it must have been good for it to be better than your best was ever before, but it doesn't mean that it was a great swim. And then obviously the other side of the coin, just because it's not a best time doesn't mean that you're not making some progress and some positive changes about your swim. So like, that's something that I think that you have done very well as an individual, learning the value of like critically putting better components together and doing them more effectively and efficiently. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, like for that race specifically, it wasn't one of my best races, but I mean, when we were going through it, there was still a bunch of things that had improved from races that I had done like prior to that one, even though like when I put those together with some of the bad things that I did, it didn't add up to like a best time, but there was still a bunch of things that were good about it. So, I mean, you can have a decent race and not have it perfectly done technically, but then you can also have like a decent race where you have some really good things in it. So, yeah.
And I think that's really good. And I think what you were getting to is focusing on the process. So many people focus on the end result, and they think if they don't see the time, then they're not making any improvement. And that is so not the case, because so many other factors come in: nutrition, rest, recovery, strength, like all of that factors in. And there's a time and a place where you want to do specific sets that you are focused on time, because you need to determine where you are physiologically as well. But then there's times where it's all put in and it's all periodized. I don't know how many coaches actually go through yearly training plans. But for me, I know that is something that I do, and I know specifically we're going to be hard-nosed about this, and we're going to go right back to the beginning, break it down, make sure we correct it. And then as you build your way up to the larger competitions and stuff, it's like, okay, where are we? Does this make sense to still continue working on this? And if we can't break it down and totally fix it, what is the Band-Aid that we can put on so it gets us through this competition? And then knowing what that is and going back when the next season starts. And it's a whole process. You can't just pick out things, well, what do you feel like doing today? It really has to depend where you are in the quad and where you are in the season too.
So true. So thank you, ladies. Thank you for your time and your knowledge. And I hope that people out there watching can take something from this and then dissect one of their own swims and then remember that when they get back into the water, whenever that is, that they remember this, but they sort of need to have a game plan or an action plan before they get back in the water. And like Carolyn, like how you talked about, if you're doing band stuff or any kind of dry land stuff, you can practice these skills right now, even though we're not technically in the pool. So for everybody out there, I hope you got something out of this. And ladies, thank you again for your time and your expertise. And that's it for today. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.